On episode 17, I'm introducing Daniel Nelson. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Daniel holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Economics and a Master's degree in Accounting. He's often found himself calling a recovering accountant. He started his career in early 2005 working as an intern for a variety of companies fulfilling financial roles. After starting his career at Ernst & Young and AOL, Daniel took a leap and started Growth Computer. He has worked as a virtual CFO for numerous startups and is currently the founder of the startup Economics 101 and Growth Computers. Daniel is now dedicated to building the first digital operating system for indoor agriculture. Wow.
Nailed it.
Wow.
Basically, that just says that I've had a lot of different types of experiences and jobs in my career.
Yes. So let's start with Economics 101. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so Startup Economics 101 is a curriculum that I recently designed. And it's designed because I have a background in undergraduate degree in economics and a master's degree in accounting. I was a CPA, hence the recovering accountant part. And recently, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with startup founders and other entrepreneurs on their quantitative side of their business. And oftentimes that means the economics, the accounting, the finance. And I found that there's a real lack of accessible information written in 2020 for these people. And so I designed the class originally for a group of entrepreneurs that I was part of. And they asked me to come in and talk about accounting. And quickly that expanded to be everything that I wished all of my consulting clients knew before I started working with them. And I think that the goal is just to use these basic concepts that I've learned so in depth and communicate them in an accessible way to people. And 2020 is a really special time to start a business because a lot of those core things that you needed to have in your company are products that you can download. And so anything that you would think of from incorporation to communication to bookkeeping is actually a lot more accessible. And so the goal of Startup Economics 101 is to just reintroduce these concepts in a much more modern and how many widgets did your factory make way.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did you envision when you launched your first startup? And what was the biggest lesson you learned and when it didn't work out, which that's what happens.
So going back to 2013, when I launched a company called KPass.
Okay.
And so the story there is that I was working at AOL.
Okay.
And I was a mid-20s guy, single, and I was in charge of AOL Kids and parental controls. And which was interesting because when I got my first computer in the early 90s, I was on AOL Kids as the kid. And after building out a lot of the back-end business model and business plan, there was a really interesting piece of technology around identity infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Basically, how do you know that I'm Dan on the internet and serve an experience for kids in a safe way?
Exactly.
And the COPPA laws are federally protected privacy laws. And that platform, I said, there's this real interesting piece of technology. Here's how we can basically package it up and sell it out to anybody else. And looking back on it, I made so many mistakes, so many. Part hubris, part ego, but really it's misunderstanding how markets work and how multi-sided markets do work. So, for example, in that, in order to make it really successful, we needed parents to buy into the safety of it, kids to want to use it, and brands to install it. And I had thought that there was this kind of vicious cycle, but really it was only one customer, and that was the sites themselves. Where if we could, and so missing that was a really big mistake on my side, but also the team. I think that it's, I had a great collection of people, like some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, but we weren't a team.
Okay.
And I think that was a real challenge that, looking back on, you really need people in the foxhole with you when shit gets real.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that way, and it kind of led to me really realizing that it wasn't gonna be able to survive.
And that's okay.
And it's okay. You know what? I learned a lot.
Yeah. And because you started working with multiple startups, and I'm sure it was so overwhelming at first.
It's hard because it's not just working with other people, which was the easy part. It's the emotional part of starting a business and really committing yourself to it, and then seeing it kind of fizzle and just be wrong on so many ways. And I think going back on it, learning from that was a really eye-opening experience. There were some specific moments where I realized instantly. In fact, I was moderating a panel where talking to someone that was actually really successful, and he was explaining what he was doing, and kind of my entire business model just evaporated in my brain as I'm on stage moderating a panel. And so you learning from that and trying to pick up the pieces on the other side and realize what worked and what I thought versus what the reality was, I think was a really important learning. Whereas, what we're doing with Grow Computer now, I'm sure we've made mistakes along the way over the last 3.5 years, but I don't think I've made the same mistakes, which is all I could feel good about at this point.
And you will continue making mistakes, but that's part of the process.
That means you're doing something that's worth it, right?
What motivated you to provide courses like Startup Economics 101 to fellow entrepreneurs?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I love teaching. So when I was a master's student at Michigan, I taught intro to accounting. I also tutored like hundreds of hours.
How was that?
I loved it. It was really interesting because coming from a subject matter background, right? So knowing the accounting, knowing the financial accounting or managerial accounting so well, and connecting it to people that didn't even want to learn it, but had to. How do you figure out how to connect real world examples that they could resonate with to this material that was really esoteric? And over time, working with startup entrepreneurs and founders, I realized that a lot of the entrepreneurs still have those negative connotations, and they might not have learned some of these basic concepts in a really accessible way. And so as I'm working more and more and more on Grow Computer and not able to do as much of the consulting, I tried to wrap up all of that knowledge and learning and concepts into one class and a series of curriculum that could be digested by anybody. And so the idea is that if you didn't know anything or you knew everything, how do I introduce a range of concepts that are extremely applicable to any business and give you the tools to hopefully say, oh, I need to learn this, and then go off from there and teach yourself kind of the rest of it. But just knowing what it is oftentimes the hardest first step.
Yeah, of course. So do you think, is there a flaw in the current finance management system for non-finance startups? Share your opinion with us.
Yes and no. I think that it's a lot better now.
Why do you say that?
Because the technology is there. So, for example, with bookkeeping, right? Bookkeeping was, when I started my first company, was a really onerous process.
Which was when again?
This was 2013.
2013, yes.
And so when you looked at bookkeeping as it was, I had to keep an internal book of records of all the transactions that I thought I had made, right? So if I go pay a bill, I'm supposed to record it on QuickBooks. Then Plaid, which I don't know if your audience has heard of it. It's a company. It actually was recently sold to Visa. But what Plaid did essentially was open up those bank accounts as APIs. And so now in 2020 for bookkeeping, all you do is you connect your QuickBooks directly to your bank account. And instead of having to do two separate sets of books, it already has integrated every transaction, and you're just sorting it where it goes. Oh, wow. And so, but how do you understand how to think about that and organize your information the right way? And I think a lot of the accounting curriculum, as I've seen it, is based on this widget model of how many things your factory makes, and not a customer acquisition cost model where how many customers are you getting, how much does it cost you, and what's the lifetime value. And to track that and report it and actually do the bookkeeping off of those ideas. It's a new way to look at these ancient topics, but with the tools that are available, they're so accessible that it's never been easier to start a company. And if you think about it in the right way, you could actually build a really efficient back end that works for you instead of working that you have to really manage and put a lot of time and effort into.
Actually, I wanted to go back to that question. I wanted to ask if you still think there's actually any other flaws that we could improve on.
Yes. And so I think that the building a financial model thing, which is really my super skill. Like I looked at what I did at Ernst & Young, And they taught me, they gave me the time and the resources to learn how to build financial models. And the idea is that here's our business. If we do this, this, and this, what are our projected results? And so every startup at some point is asked, do you have a model? Mm-hmm. And the challenge with that is while there's some technology that's out there, oftentimes you need to hire somebody like me to build your specific financial model. Mm-hmm. I love it because I think it's a really cool way to understand businesses. But for me to build something in Excel where it's essentially I can code in Excel to send it to somebody else, there is that mm-hmm. barrier. And so not only is there a conceptual barrier, but there's a platform barrier. Right. And so I think that you're starting to see some new innovation to give entrepreneurs better tools to actually build these models. Because if you do it the right way, not only is it a way to project out what your business is able to do, but it's a really great tool to understand investments and run rates. And if you build it the right way, on the other side, after you've been operating, you can now check and see, all right, if I thought my customer acquisition cost was going to be at $3, but it was at $8, what did that affect on my bottom line? Right. But knowing that that was the reason why, or that was a reason why, is a really powerful thing. Because even if you could say, well, it's much higher, it's much higher because, right? You're not, and one of the things I say in the class is you want to explain these things in video concepts and not in photos. Right. So it's not my customer acquisition cost is 3. It is 3. I thought it would be 10. Here's why it's different. And that's where a lot of the value is. And that's how you learn a lot about your customers and your business. Right.
And for our viewers, can you explain Grow Computer, its mission, and how it helps indoor agriculture? And I'm sure you guys been impacted by COVID-19. Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And so Grow Computer is something very different from what we've been talking about. Right. And it's something that happened to me as much as I kind of created this company. But really, I started to look at when I was going on my honeymoon 4 years ago, I had a balcony garden here on Park Avenue in New York. Mm-hmm. And I loved this garden. I had spent 3 years improving it. Mm-hmm. I had tomatoes, I had peppers, I had strawberries, basil, whatever. And but it was something that I spent a lot of time on because for the first time since I moved out of my parents' house before college, I had outdoor space. And so as I'm going away for 17 days, how do I monitor and track and control this system such that I can keep it alive? Mm-hmm. And that question kind of sent me down this odyssey because when I came back, first off, there was no solution that was available. There was no way that I could combine components outside of really Raspberry Pi and Arduino or investing lots of money in it to do it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and it just sent me down this kind of odyssey into urban agriculture and the opportunities of growing food and plants in a controlled environment versus traditional ag, which is outside. Mm-hmm. And so the rationale with Grow Computer is that as traditional agriculture gets fundamentally more expensive, mm-hmm. And that's one of the impacts of COVID, where maybe you're not having as many workers, you have soil erosion, you have climate change. In certain places of the world, you have locusts, which are eating literally everything. And so as you look at these changes that are happening, if the cost of a per pound produce was cheap enough, could it move locally into controlled environments and be part of a local food system? And I believe yes. And so what we're doing at Grow Computer...
Do you think it could happen in New York?
Absolutely. Well, and so, we're within 20 miles of where we sit right here in downtown Manhattan, there's probably more indoor controlled environment investment than anywhere else in the world. It's a loaded statement, but we have Aero Farms and Bowery Farms, which have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They're across the river in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. We have Gotham Greens in Brooklyn. We have companies like Smallhold. We have Farm Shelf. We have Farm One. There's a really broad and robust community of people that are committed to solving this. And from that community, we birthed Grow Computer. And the idea from that is the same one that I had when I was going on my honeymoon, is if you have this system where you're delivering light, water, nutrients, air
Right.
circulation to plants. How do you control that remotely? And how do you do it such that any two people that are inherently going to build unique systems can share information? Mm-hmm. So my favorite metaphor is kind of like Microsoft Windows, where you have all these different manufacturers that build their own PCs, and Windows sits in that. Right. And so if you're on Windows, now anybody that's using it can download Photoshop. They can download right. Google Chrome. Without that, imagine Photoshop writing their software for every single configuration of every PC model. It'd be impossible. And so that's the concept that we're taking into this IoT world, wow. where by creating this right. operating system that can connect to anything, yeah. We're allowing any grower to share information from one system to the next. You can collaborate. You can compete. We're working on an educational program yeah. where we're going to have high school students run a competition to see who can grow better. But also, really cool is you can now develop and share applications. So imagine writing a machine learning algorithm that can sit on a video feed and say there might be pests. When you get back to your farm, start in zone 4 and check up on the plants.
This is very futuristic.
It's super futuristic, but it's also...
But it's happening.
It's happening. Yeah. And what's cool is that we're not really reinventing a lot of technology, but we're putting a lot of right. different concepts together yes. in a new way. Right. And our goal is to make it affordable and accessible for anybody.
Wow.
And so it's been a really fun project. And, looking at KPass versus Grow Computer, the difference is the team.
So you think you have an amazing team?
I believe I have an amazing team. And, the fact is that we care, and we've been working on this for 3 years. We're totally bootstrapped. Is
there anyone from the previous?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
New. Yeah.
I would rehire mm-hmm. numerous people, but that's in a different situation right. to do specific components. But right now, everybody on the team, we met through this community of indoor agriculture growers, people that mm-hmm. were interested in it. And just by running this thesis by people, was able to build a team. And so the difference is there of having 2 amazing technologists, a great designer, and a great marketing person that believe in what we're doing, are owners in their own right of the company. It allows us to be a lot more effective, and allows me as the CEO to, CEO means Chief Everything Officer, but also the more specific work I'm ending up doing. You kind of realize, okay, that's something that needs to get done by somebody else. Right. And so the fact that I have great developers and I have a great designer, a great marketing person, those are areas where we're able to build, and the sum of the parts is definitely greater than the individuals. Areas. Exactly.
So having worked in a startup culture, and what's the best financial advice you would share with aspiring entrepreneurs watching this?
Sure. I think 2 pieces of advice, really. The first one is, don't build it or buy it if you could rent it. Okay. And it's a kind of a profound way to say it, but basically, if you're building something for your company, I need to build this really robust backend. I need to build this user management system. I need to build this customer engagement platform. You probably don't, because there's already a company out there that's doing it. Mm-hmm. And so what the purpose of that is as a startup, there's so many places to spend money. There's so many people to ask you for services or whatever. But if you can leverage software as a service companies and pay $30 per month instead of spending $10,000. Right. What is that? 300 months that you're running for?
Right.
I think legal is a really good example where you will need legal work, but up front, the incorporation doesn't need that much. Anyone can go on Gust Launch or Stripe Atlas or LegalZoom or Zen Business, and for a couple $100, you could have a company incorporated in Delaware with an EIN number in 3 days. Yeah. My first company with KPass, it cost me $5,000 of legal work, right? That's all been packaged up. And if you could figure out how to avoid those large capital outlays to build and buy something and rent it instead, and at least kick it down the road so that you do have more flexibility.
Right.
You have a lot longer of a burn rate than you thought. And then the second one is organization. Start organizing your information at the beginning. Know what accounts you have. Know your passwords. Know where your legal documents are. Know where your key information is, such that when somebody does want to ask you, you don't have to spend 2 weeks going through every document, figuring out every single person where they saved their stuff, because it's already where it needs to be.
Right.
And that organization is just a headache that if anyone has ever done diligence, it's a headache. But if you have that information thought of from the beginning,
it's just a lot easier.
It's just easier. And you say, where am I going to save this NDA?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a folder with all of my NDAs, and there's one folder, so I don't have to worry about where they are.
And you mentioned previously that you are a recovering accountant. What's the inside story to that?
It's just a fun way to say it.
Okay.
So like I said, I started my career doing accounting and economics. I had a CPA license.
Yes.
I've since turned it off. And so when I started doing accounting, I didn't really love the idea of being an accountant. I didn't go out and say, I want to be an accountant forever. Yeah. But I saw the value in understanding how accounting works, right? So I understood that, okay, if I understood how to speak the language of accounting, which is really the underlying language of business, that it would have a tremendous amount of value throughout my career.
And it did. I'm sure
and
it did.
Absolutely did.
Of course.
But being an accountant is not. It's a whole different world. And so, it's funny because like everyone asks me when I say, I can help as a virtual CFO. Do you do taxes? No, I don't do taxes. That's a different thing. But I use the skills of the accounting education and accounting roles that I've had to help communicate these concepts and build smarter, more flexible businesses.
Right. And what do you think are the top 3 necessary personality traits of a CFO?
Top 3. I would say organization, definitely, because you're oftentimes the one that's going to be asked to pull this stuff.
Yeah, like you just mentioned
like
before.
I just said,
you need to be organized. Yeah.
Organization's key. And, it's one of those things where if you start from the beginning and you start to be organized and you make it a point as a leader in the company to be consistent and organized in that way.
Everyone would lead by example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell us, a quick story about Grow Computer, where when we started the company, we said there's no internal emails. Everything's on Slack, right? Everyone has an email address, but if you need anybody internally, it's on Slack. And I found that no internal email, I'm sure there's dozens of listeners out there that are like, oh my God, my email inbox where I've been CC'd on 50 things. We found that Slack is really effective for us. So that's 1, organization. 2, communication. You're oftentimes the subject matter expert of economics and accounting and how the numbers work. And you have to figure out how to communicate that to other stakeholders, right? So it's understanding what the decisions can be and how do you communicate it back. So you're talking to the marketing people and the tech people and the ops people and the sales people. You understand what those variables are and how they work with the whole, and then you could help communicate what would happen if you do this, or this.
Right.
And the third one, it has to be optimism, because it's so easy to see all of the risks and everything, but I've learned that people surprise you. And entrepreneurs are the most amazing group of people, because when someone says they're going to do something, believe it. And so the optimism from the finance side, it's not, here's our risks of if we do this, we're going to go bankrupt. It's like, all right, well, we want to do this. Let's get creative and let's think about different ways that we can enable everybody else to be successful.
Right. And that involves a little risk. But
it involves a little risk, but you have to be understanding of it, but not dwell on it. Because especially now, it's too easy to just dwell on it. So
what is your projection on this year's economy, especially with what's going on? I've asked that question before. I get different responses. Some people are more optimistic than others. And there are some people that are optimistic. So I don't know.
Here's an answer that I was asked this recently, and this is the answer that I like. I don't know if it's a direct answer to your question. But personally, I think that humanity is much better off in a post-COVID world than we were in a pre-COVID world. Okay. I think that there was a lot of inertia towards consumption and excess and exploitation and extraction that were built into the overall economy. Right now, everybody's learning that those things don't necessarily need to happen. Yeah. There's a new way, and technology is uniquely capable to power that new way, and for the first time maybe ever in human history. And so as we look at how behavior was fundamentally changed for 8 billion people, that coming out of it, there's going to be a whole new world of solutions. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be really rough for a lot of people, but there is this ability to take all of the latent assets that we have already created here in this country and make them work better and make them work more efficiently and sustainably. And I think that was needed before COVID because, I was very, very caught up in climate change and some of the real macro effects of that. But now you look at the air is cleaner. There's less international trade. There's less flying, which has its definite drawbacks.
Right.
But how do you flip your mentality and think about the possibilities of how it could be? And there's a lot of opportunity out there. People still are living their life and they need stuff.
And I think as we're talking, there's going to be so many new businesses
Absolutely.
forming. So just many new ideas, and people are brainstorming as we're talking right now.
Absolutely. I hope so. I hope so. And I think think about things like, all right, we had this conversation the other day where there's factories, there's commercial real estate, there's office space, there's retail spaces all over the country. Maybe not here in New York, but maybe in upstate New York that are available, that people want to do something with. Right. That there's not only is there a factory there, there's a group of people that know what to do in the factory.
Right.
And so as you think about how everything was offshored over the last 30 to 40 years, to save a couple bucks per product, bringing it back, maybe you can create a more efficient version of that today. And I would like, my projections on the future of the economy are, I don't even want to say that, but I do think that coming out of this, there's a lot of opportunity to create this kind of futuristic society that we've all seen in movies and talked about, but actually to live it. There's a unique capability now that there might not have been 4 months ago.
Right. Where do you see the future with AIs? It's not in here, but
AI. I think AI, for me, how I would like to see it as a tool to make people more efficient. I hope it doesn't replace people, but I think that for Grow Computer, for example, AI like that. Oh, here's where you start. Here's your list of tasks to be the real world farmer in this system based on what the computer identified as risks. Right? So leverage that power and that capability, but maybe not totally rely on it. Right? It's definitely going to inform a lot, and the power that Google offers for free as their services, or IBM Watson. These are multi-billion-dollar investments that they're giving away for free. So I think as we could figure out how to utilize the key parts to it to make our businesses more operationally efficient, to make our lives more efficient, there's going to be a lot of that's going to come out of it.
One last question.
Of course.
Out of all of the industries you worked in, which one are you the most passionate about? I think I know the answer, but
I love the urban agriculture community. I'm a very, very recent entrant into it, but this is probably representative of tons of new industries that are out there, but it's full of second career people. And so it's full of people like me that came from somewhere else, that saw the opportunities of sustainable farming, green roofs, solar power, organic farming, whatever, that have come into this community. And they're there because they want to be there.
Right.
And there's this real kind of positive vibe, and people really feel like they're helping out. And we're going to have to be the ones that do it. And I love that energy. But the New York startup scene is pretty great. And there's a lot of super, super smart people that are doing amazing things. And that's why, I'm a New Yorker born and raised, but living here, there's so many opportunities to work with great people every day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was great.
It was so much fun.
I hope I can come back sometime soon.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
For more episodes and podcast announcements, visit our website and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. All episodes will also be shared on our YouTube account in video version. Be sure to subscribe to our channel.